All right, so the Atlanta Hawks have been extremely busy this week. Obviously, earlier this week, they picked up Zachary Ricochet with the number one overall pick in the draft. And a couple of minutes ago, they participated in a huge trade with the Pelicans, sending Dejounte Murray over to New Orleans in exchange for Larry Nance Jr., Dyson Daniels, a 2025 first round pick, and a 2027 first round pick as well. So Atlanta this offseason had a bit of a choice to make. There were kind of two ways they can look at things. Do we continue to try to build a contender around Trae Young, or do we begin a rebuild? Those were two legitimate questions to ask. That was something they were considering once they got that first overall pick, because the truth about the Hawks is this. 2021, they make an extremely deep playoff run. They nearly make the NBA Finals. Since then, they have not gotten back to that level. They have gotten progressively worse over the years, despite adding some big pieces to their roster. They paired Dejounte Murray up with Trae Young and also got Quinn Snyder, who at that time was one of the best coaches in the league. And still with that, they did not improve. Things got really ugly last season when they lost in the play-in tournament to the Chicago Bulls. So there are legitimate concerns about whether or not there is upside right now with building around Trae Young. And looking at how they're moving so far throughout this offseason with getting and keeping that number one pick and also moving away to Dejounte Murray for the draft capital they got back, it does look like they may be going into this rebuilding type of situation. Best believe this is not the last move they'll make this offseason. They still have assets like Trae Young and assets like Clint Capella and some other pieces that are still here on this particular roster. So I think that's the path that the Hawks are on right now. It's a little disappointing, like I said, considering how great they were as a team back in 2021, to see them now almost make this choice to start rebuilding and going into a different direction. For the Pelicans, this is a really, really good trade. First off, they get off of Larry Nance's expiring contract. He's going to be an unrestricted free agent in 2025. And so think about this starting lineup. If this is the only move they make this offseason, the starting lineup looks like this: CJ McCollum, Dejounte Murray, Brandon Ingram, Zion Williamson, and possibly Jonas Valanciunas. Who knows? They may go small. They may throw in Herb Jones in the starting lineup and slide Zion to the 5. But still, that is a really, really good starting lineup with some good pieces outside of that. Trey Murphy, right? Herb Jones, as I just mentioned, Jose Alvarado. There are still some good pieces outside of that. That is a really, really good roster that could go really deep into the postseason. As far as Dejounte Murray goes, this Pelicans team has needed a really good playmaker for a while. They haven't had a legitimate playmaker on this roster since Lonzo Ball. Dejounte can fill that role perfectly. Last time he was given like full-time playmaking duties was with the Spurs, where he averaged 9 assists per game. Those are elite assist numbers, right? And on top of that, he adds to their already really good defense. He gives them another really good point of attack guy. Herb Jones is already an all-defensive player. Dejounte Murray can also be an all-defensive player out on the perimeter for this team. So he just continues to boost this Pelicans defense, and he's going to help them a lot from an offensive standpoint because he is a really good shot creator, right? That's something that they also needed around Zion. CJ McCollum kind of had these stretches where he went cold. Brandon Ingram is really good, but having another guy out there for kind of like insurance is perfect. Dejounte Murray is a really good shot creator, a really good scorer, has scored in the 20s multiple times throughout his career. So he can take a lot of pressure off of CJ and Brandon at times. So they have a really good supporting cast of scorers around Zion. On top of that, Dejounte can space the floor. That was one question people had for him when he went over to ATL. How well can he play off the ball? Just this past season, he shot at 46% on catch and shoot threes. Obviously, they're going to need someone to space the floor to allow Zion to drive to the basket and have good angles to the lane, because that's kind of his entire MO. Makes a lot of sense. This trade helps them on both ends of the basketball. Only thing stopping this team is injuries. Let's be completely honest. If Zion didn't get hurt in the play-in tournament, they probably could have got a lot deeper into the postseason, right? That was a really, really, really good team that got better offensively, progressively throughout the season, and was also really good defensively. So the only thing stopping them now is health. It's that simple. Your best player has to be available. We saw that kill a lot of teams in the Eastern Conference. We saw it with Miami, right? Jimmy Butler was hurt in that first round, and the Heat weren't able to keep up with the Celtics. Second round, Donovan Mitchell missed a couple of games in that series, and the Cavs weren't able to keep up with the Celtics. And also happened in the conference finals with the Pacers. Your best guy has to get available. No matter how good your supporting pieces are, no matter how many good all-stars you have outside of your best guy, you still need your best player to be available to win playoff series. Period, point blank. So that's what it's going to ultimately come down to for this team. That's a big question. Zion has not been the most reliable from a health standpoint, even at times where he's looked really healthy and he's looked like he can go deep into the playoffs. Things have kind of gotten cut off. We saw that, as I said, last year in the play-in tournament. He looked great during the season and still ended up getting cut off in the play-in tournament. So that's going to be the biggest thing is health. But as far as the basketball fit, this makes total sense. And again, they can continue to play around with some things in the starting lineup. They could go small and have Zion at the 5, have Valanciunas kind of come off the bench and try to boost themselves from a defensive standpoint by sliding Herb Jones in there. There are a million different things they can do, but this is a really, really good Pelicans team with the addition of a guy like Dejounte Murray. So like I said, for the Hawks, I think this thrusts them into rebuild position. I don't think this is the last move they make this offseason. I'm not mad at them for going into rebuild position because I'm having the same questions about Trae Young. What is the upside? Can you really build a contender around him? There are just some players that you just can't build around. They may be really good players. They may be really good scorers and they get amazing numbers, but they're not players you can really build a team around. Paul George is kind of in that category. Really good player throughout the course of his career, but he's not a dude where you're like, we're going to try to build a contender around this guy, right? Trae Young is kind of in that boat right now. Phenomenal player, phenomenal skill set, but not somebody I think you can build a contender around and everything like that. So that's the thing. So we'll see what they end up doing the rest of the offseason. I do think there could have been better packages they could have gotten for Dejounte Murray, even with their situation with trying to rebuild and go into another direction. There could have been, better moves they could have made, better packages they could have got back. But either way, at least they're looking, or they look like they're looking to go into another direction as far as this franchise. So we'll see what else they do in the offseason. I don't like to do the winners and losers things when it comes to trades because trades should be mutually beneficial. But this is one of those where I do feel like there's an outright winner. And I really do think the Pelicans kind of got over on the Hawks a bit, right? This isn't a really flattering amount of capital back for a player like Dejounte Murray, who I think is really underrated, right? People really let his stint in ATL lower his value. And I just don't think that's fair. He's still a really good player who's in a situation that did not fit. So amazing move for the Pelicans. I do think this makes them legitimate contenders out in the Western Conference. It's just going to come down to health. That's it. But on paper, I don't see much failing for this Pelicans team. I just really don't. Now, they did lose Kenny Atkinson, who was really good with kind of helping this team revitalize themselves offensively. So we'll see if they're able to bounce back in that regard. But great roster move by that front office. And we'll see what else they do. And we'll also see, as I said, what else the Hawks do moving forward into the rest of what will be a very interesting offseason for this franchise.